Michael wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart a steady, contented rhythm against his ribs. The afternoon sun beat down on his back, a familiar warmth he hadn't felt in months. In the wake of his divorce, this house had been a shell, a cold, empty space filled with the ghosts of a life that had failed. But the pool was the final frontier of reclamation, a murky green abyss that had been a monument to neglect. Now the roar of the pump was a song of renewal, the massive outflow pipe gushing a torrent of water that smelled of chlorine and old leaves. Each gallon was a pound of weight lifted from his shoulders. He had bought the house fully aware of the work it needed. It was a fixer-upper, a project that had seemed daunting at first, but now felt like a purpose. The pool was a beast of its own, clogged filters, a broken skimmer, and a liner that was more patch than original fabric. He had spent weeks just researching the proper way to handle it, and the unanimous advice was to start from scratch. Drain it, clean it, inspect it, and rebuild. This was day one of the drainage. The peaceful sound was suddenly shattered by a shriek. "Hey, you! What in the ever-living hell do you think you're doing?" Michael sighed, a long, weary exhalation that turned to steam in the humid air. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Deborah, his neighbor, the self-appointed mayor of their small cul-de-sac kingdom. Since he'd moved in 3 months ago, she'd materialized at his fence line to complain about everything from his mailman's truck idling too long to the color of his new garbage can. He'd tried to be friendly, to be a good neighbor, but she was an immovable force of grievance. He turned slowly, offering a tired smile. "Just draining the pool, Deborah. It's been neglected for a while, and I need to do some repairs." She marched to the chain-link fence that separated their properties, her arms crossed tight over her chest, a posture of absolute and unshakable authority. Her floral sundress was cinched with a belt that looked too tight, and her face was flushed a brilliant red. "Draining it. You can't just drain the pool. That's a shared resource." Michael's smile faltered. "I'm sorry? It's my pool. It's on my property." He gestured to the visible property stake a few feet from the fence line, a small metal marker he'd found when cleaning up the yard. "See? Right here." "That doesn't matter," she declared, her voice rising to a pitch that made his ears ache. "The water, that's community property. I've been paying for its maintenance for years. When the association had it maintained, I paid for the chemicals. You think you can just come here and steal it?" He blinked, processing the bizarre claim. "Deborah, I own this property, including the pool. I'm draining the water onto my own lawn and into the proper sewer outlet at the street. And I've seen the records. There's no community association here. I'm the first owner since the original developer." A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, quickly replaced by indignation. "Oh, so now you're a lawyer? You think you can just get away with this because you're new? I'll have you know, I have grandfathered rights to this pool. My kids grew up splashing in this water even when it was this side of the fence. I considered it an extension of my property." Michael felt a vein start to throb in his temple. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a performance. She was fabricating a narrative out of thin air and then convincing herself it was true. "That's not how property lines work, Deborah. I'm sorry, but I have to do this. I've got a crew coming next week to start the repairs." She pulled her phone from her pocket and began to tap furiously, her gaze never leaving his. "We'll see about that. You are destroying my property value, and I'm not going to stand for it. I am calling the police. You are committing theft and vandalism, and I will see you get arrested for it." "Theft of what?" Michael asked, a genuine sense of bewilderment overriding his frustration. "The water? It's just water. It's not even fit for swimming." "The pool! You're stealing the pool! By draining it, you're trying to hide something. I know it. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and the police will agree with me. This is a very serious crime." She spoke into her phone's microphone with a dramatic pause. "Yes, officer? I'd like to report a crime in progress. My neighbor is illegally draining his pool and claiming it's his property when it's clearly a shared community asset. He's destroying community property, and I'm afraid he's a flight risk. I'll be here waiting." She ended the call with a flourish and put the phone back in her pocket, a satisfied, righteous look on her face. "They're on their way. Now let's see what you have to say to them." Michael stood by his gushing pump, a surreal feeling washing over him. This was not a real problem. This was a sitcom plot, a ridiculous misunderstanding. He considered shutting the pump off, but the thought of giving in to her baseless demands made him angry. No, he was within his rights. He would just explain the situation to the police, and they would see how absurd it was and tell her to stop. He'd be a free man again, with a clean pool and a quiet life. 10 minutes later, the surreal comedy took on a sharp, professional edge. A patrol car rolled up the street and parked directly in front of his driveway. 2 officers, a young woman with a sharp, no-nonsense haircut and a larger, older man with a tired face, emerged. They looked at each other, then at Michael's gushing pipe, and then at Deborah standing triumphantly on her lawn. The sheer absurdity of the scene was palpable. The older officer, Officer Reynolds, approached first. He had the calm, placating demeanor of a man who had dealt with 1,000 bizarre neighbor disputes. "Afternoon. We got a call about a dispute over a pool. Are you Mr. Miller?" "Yes, I am," Michael said, gesturing to the property. "It's my pool. I'm draining it for repairs. My neighbor Deborah says I'm stealing it." "Officer." Reynolds managed to suppress a smile, though a muscle in his cheek twitched. "She said you were stealing the pool?" "The water," she said, "or the pool itself. The story changes a little bit. She seems to think it's a community resource. I've tried to explain it's not, but she won't listen." "I see." Reynolds looked at the pump, at the fence, at Michael. He was clearly trying to find the crime. "And the water is draining onto your property? Or into the storm drain?" "Into the street and then into the storm drain, as per city code for this kind of thing. I have a permit application filed too." He had been meticulous about this process, knowing Deborah was always watching. The younger officer, Officer Chen, walked over to Deborah. Michael watched as Deborah launched into a passionate, finger-pointing diatribe. Her arms waved dramatically, her head shaking with conviction. Officer Chen listened patiently, her expression unreadable. She occasionally nodded or wrote something on her notepad. Michael knew that whatever Deborah was saying was likely a wild fabrication, but seeing it being documented gave him a jolt of anxiety. This was becoming more real than he had anticipated. After a few minutes, Officer Chen walked back over to Reynolds. They spoke in low tones, glancing at Michael, then at the pool, then at Deborah. Reynolds sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He returned to Michael. "Mr. Miller, your neighbor, Deborah. She's claiming this is a shared community pool. She's saying that by draining it without her consent, you're essentially stealing the water, which she believes is a shared paid-for asset, and causing irreparable damage to the property by making it unusable. She's also claiming a family easement from a previous owner." "That's completely insane," Michael said, his voice hard. "There is no community association. The property lines are clear. An easement? She's making it up. I'm a single man trying to fix his house. Why would I be trying to hide something? Look at the water. It's pea soup. I'm doing the neighborhood a favor by getting rid of it." "Look, I get it," Reynolds said, his voice lowered. "On the surface, this is a civil matter. It's a neighbor dispute. But she's alleging property damage and theft, and she's got a witness." Michael's heart sank. "A witness? Who?" As if on cue, Deborah returned to her porch, where an elderly woman with wispy white hair was sitting in a lawn chair. It was her mother. Michael had seen her before, but she rarely left the house. Deborah pulled her to her feet and steered her toward the fence. "Tell them, Mama. Tell them about the pool." Deborah's voice was syrupy sweet, the fake kindness she used as a weapon. The old woman squinted at Michael. Her eyes were cloudy and unfocused. "The pool?" she said, her voice a fragile whisper. Yes, the pool. So much splashing. Johnny used to splash so hard. The big blue pool. See? Deborah said, turning to the officers. She knows. We all used to use it. It was part of the neighborhood. He's taking it away from all of us. The officers exchanged a look. Officer Chen wrote something down. The mother's words were vague and nonsensical, not a genuine testimony but a fragment of an old memory being weaponized. Michael knew it. The officers knew it. But Deborah was trying to force a different reality. Reynolds turned back to Michael, his expression now completely serious. Mr. Miller, this isn't ideal, but we have a witness statement, however vague. We have a claim of property damage and a claim of theft. We can't just dismiss this. I have to file a report. For now, just stop draining the pool until you can get this sorted out with her and with a lawyer. Michael felt the color drain from his face. Stop draining it? I have a crew coming in a few days. I can't stop. The pump is running. I'm halfway through. The silence that followed the patrol car's departure was heavy, suffocating. The air, once filled with the rhythmic gush of water, now held only the distant drone of an unmoved pump, a ghost of its former purpose. Michael stood frozen, a small, laminated card with a case number feeling like a brand in his hand. The yellow police tape, a vibrant, violent splash against the muted green of his neglected lawn, was a physical manifestation of his new reality. He wasn't just a man fixing his house. He was now a suspect, a man tangled in a nonsensical drama orchestrated by a neighbor he barely knew. He walked around the half-drained pool, his steps heavy, a man inspecting a crime scene where he was both the victim and the accused. The water level was a little over halfway down, a thick, dark ring of algae marking the high point on the liner. He needed to get the pump off, but the thought of touching it felt like a violation of the police order. He felt a deep, visceral anger at the injustice of it all, at the officers who had, in their bureaucratic impartiality, sided with the louder, more theatrical lie. A smug smile from Deborah on her porch caught his eye. She was sipping a glass of iced tea, her posture one of casual victory. Her mother was gone, taken back inside, the puppet show concluded. Michael's anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. He would not be intimidated. He would not let this woman, this caricature of suburban pettiness, ruin his fresh start. He spent the rest of the evening on the phone, first with the city. The woman on the other end was confused, then vaguely amused, then exasperated. A police report about draining a pool? Sir, that's not a municipal matter. The police shouldn't have been involved. As long as you have a permit application, which we do have on file, you're compliant. Just call the police department and clear it up with them. So he called the police department. A desk sergeant, a tired, gruff-sounding man, listened to his story with a weary sigh. Look, Mr. Miller, if the officers on scene felt there was a credible enough dispute to file a report, they did their job. We can't just unfile a report. It's a formal record now. You'll have to handle it on your own. It's a civil matter. The irony was not lost on him. The police had treated it as a criminal matter, and now the police were telling him it was a civil matter. He was in a bureaucratic purgatory of Deborah's making. The only path forward, it seemed, was to find a lawyer. He found one online, a small local practice specializing in property and civil disputes. The lawyer's name was Sarah Jenkins, and her voice on the phone was sharp and direct. Michael, still reeling, gave her the condensed version of the story. There was a pause on the line. So let me get this straight, Sarah said, her voice dry. Your neighbor, who has no documented claim to your pool, called the police because you were draining it for repairs. The police, despite finding no evidence of a crime, filed a report and put up crime scene tape around your property. And now they won't remove it and you can't continue your repairs. Is that about right? Yes, Michael said, the single word feeling like a surrender. That's about right. It's a special kind of crazy, Sarah said, and Michael heard the faint tap of keys on her end. We've had neighbor disputes over fence lines, over trees, over barking dogs. Never a swimming pool that isn't even being used. And the police tape, that's a new one. It seems like the officers took the path of least resistance. Easier to put up tape and tell you to stop than to deal with a screaming woman on her front lawn. Michael felt a sliver of hope. She understood. She wasn't dismissing him. "So, you can help me?" "I can," she said, "but we need to act quickly. She's trying to establish a precedent, to create a paper trail that supports her delusion. The first step is to send a formal cease and desist letter. We'll outline your clear legal ownership of the property, cite the city permits, and demand she retract her false claims. The second step is to officially demand the police department. Remove the tape and declare the matter closed. This will cost you some money, Michael. Are you prepared for that?" "I am," he said, the ghost of his ex-wife's expensive lawyer's fees still a recent memory. This was a different kind of war, but he was prepared to fight it. "I'm not going to let her win." The next morning, the day that his crew was supposed to arrive, Michael went out to his yard to find another surprise. A small laminated sign staked into the ground on Deborah's side of the fence, directly opposite his taped-off pool. It was professionally printed and read, "Save our Culdesac. Stop the destruction of community property. For more information, please see our Facebook page." His blood ran cold. She hadn't just called the police. She was mobilizing. This wasn't just a dispute. It was a campaign. He immediately went inside, logged onto Facebook, and searched for the name. It wasn't. Hard to find. Save Our Culdesac, a group with only 4 members, had been created just that morning. The main post was a grainy, zoomed-in picture of Michael's gushing drain pipe. The caption, written by Deborah, was a masterpiece of sensationalist. "Passive-aggressive outrage. My new neighbor, Mr. Miller, is destroying our beautiful community. He is illegally draining our shared community pool, a place where our children have made countless memories, and is refusing to stop. He even laughed in my face when I told him I've paid for its upkeep for years. The police have been called and have cordoned off the area. This is a very serious matter. Please help us save our neighborhood from this arrogant individual who has no respect for our shared history or property. Call the city. Demand action." He scrolled through the comments. Only 2. One from Deborah's mother, "He is a very bad man," and another from someone named Greg Harrison. "I'm sorry to hear this, Deborah. So awful. Some people have no respect." It was small, pathetic, and utterly infuriating. She was trying to poison the well, to make him the villain in a story that was pure fiction. He immediately took screenshots of the post and sent them to Sarah. Sarah called him back 10 minutes later. "This is bad, Michael. We need to move on this immediately. Not only is she making false claims to the police, she's now slandering you in public. This adds another layer to our case. I'm sending the cease and desist letter and the demand to the police department today. I've also drafted a second letter for her that is specifically about libel and slander. But we need to do more. We need to fight her on her own terms." "How?" he asked, feeling helpless. "You need to find out what she's talking about with this shared history and grandfathered rights. It's likely a complete fabrication, but she's clinging to it for a reason. And the only way we can legally shut her down is if we can definitively prove there's no basis for her claims. I'll do some digging on the property records, but you need to talk to your other neighbors. Find out what they know about this pool, if anything. And be careful, Michael. She's already branded you as the villain." Michael hung up the phone and felt a renewed sense of dread. He was now a detective, a fact-finder, and he was completely alone in enemy territory. He looked out his window at the police tape, at Deborah's sign, at the half-drained, crime-scene, yellow-taped pool. He felt a wave of sadness wash over him. This was supposed to be a place of healing, a place of new beginnings. Instead, it was a battleground. He chose the bravest, most direct route. He went next door to his other neighbor, a quiet man, in his 50s, named Tom, who had always given him a polite, if distant, nod. Tom was watering his petunias. Michael walked over to the fence, feeling a sense of deep unease. "Hey, Tom," Michael said, trying to sound casual. "You got a minute?" Tom turned, a small, quizzical frown on his face. He glanced at the police tape. "Rough day, huh?" "You could say that," Michael said, then launched into the story, trying to keep his voice calm and factual, not emotional. He told him about Deborah's claims, about the police, about the Facebook page. He watched Tom's face, waiting for some kind of reaction. Tom listened, his expression shifting from quizzical to stunned, and then finally to a kind of grim, resigned recognition. When Michael finished, Tom shook his head slowly. "Deborah's a piece of work," he said. "Been here for 20 years and she's always been the same. Needs to be in charge of something. A few years ago it was the front yard decorations. Everyone had to be exactly the same. When a new family moved in and put up a pink flamingo, she called the city and said it was a code violation. They had to take it down." "But the pool," Michael said, trying to steer him back to the topic. "This shared community pool idea, is there any truth to it?" Tom looked at the pool, then back at Michael, a strange look in his eyes. He lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. "Not that I know of. The old owner, an old man named Mr. Peterson, had a bunch of grandkids. They'd come over and swim sometimes, and Deborah would let her kids play with them. She always treated it like her own, even back then. When Mr. Peterson died and the house went up for sale, she was furious. She said the new owner would never take care of it like she did. She tried to buy the house herself, but the family sold it for more than she was offering." A cold finger of suspicion traced its way up Michael's spine. "She tried to buy the house?" "Yeah. Made a lowball offer and then got mad when they didn't take it. She told me she was going to make life difficult for whoever moved in. Said she was going to get it one way or another." This was it. The motivation. She wasn't just a busybody. She was a woman trying to reclaim something The wind, a gentle whisper against the half-empty shell of the pool, seemed to carry a mocking sound. Michael stood on his lawn, the bizarre, hastily drawn diagram in his hand, feeling like a forged death warrant for his peace of mind. Deborah stood at the fence line, her posture a parody of a triumphant queen holding a royal decree. Her smile was sharp, a weapon made of pure malice. "He left it to me. He promised. My children, my grandchildren were supposed to have this pool forever." Her voice, now a stage whisper, was filled with a chilling mixture of grief and victory. It was a performance for an audience of one, and Michael was trapped in the front row. He didn't argue, didn't try to reason with her. He just looked at the yellowed paper, at the clumsy lines and the shaky signature. His mind was racing, trying to figure out the legal implications. Could a handwritten will, created God knows how long ago, override a deed? A sense of profound injustice washed over him. He had been so careful, so by the book, and here she was, creating a new reality out of thin air and a cheap piece of paper. He turned and walked inside, the sound of her satisfied laughter following him. He immediately called Sarah. She was sharp and concise as he explained the new development. "A handwritten will, called a holographic will, can be valid in some jurisdictions," she said, her voice a calm counterpoint to his panicked energy. "But it has to be entirely in the testator's handwriting and usually requires witnesses. It also can't contradict a later professionally drawn will. The key here, Michael, is to find the official will and estate documents. It's highly unlikely Mr. Peterson left his entire house to one party and a pool to a neighbor on a napkin. We need to go to the county recorder's office." The next day, Michael was a man on a mission. He left early, the police tape a mocking banner over his driveway. He drove to the county seat, the silence of the car a welcome change from the constant, low-level buzz of anxiety that had become his life. The county office was a dusty, bureaucratic labyrinth, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just fixing a pool anymore. He was unearthing a truth. He found the file for the Peterson estate. It was a thick manila folder, smelling of old paper and dust. Inside was a treasure trove of mundane but critical information: the official deed, the property survey, and the will. It was a standard document, professionally drafted and witnessed by two people and a notary public. The will left the entire estate, the house and all its contents and land, including the pool, to Mr. Peterson's two children. There was not a single mention of Deborah or any informal arrangements. Michael's heart leapt. But as he was leafing through the rest of the documents, a small, faded letter tucked into a side pocket caught his eye. It was addressed to the executor of the estate, dated just a few months before Mr. Peterson's death. It detailed a series of escalating complaints from a neighbor, a Mrs. Davenport, concerning a perceived entitlement to the pool. It explained that Mrs. Davenport had been a friend of his late wife, and her children had often used the pool in the past. But in recent years, her behavior had become obsessive. He had clearly stated that he wished for no further communication with her and had even considered filing a restraining order. Michael felt a surge of cold fury mixed with a profound sense of vindication. It was all there. A historical record. A paper trail of Deborah's entitlement and obsession, documented by the very man she was now claiming as a benefactor. This wasn't a petty dispute. It was the continuation of a long-standing pattern. Her handwritten will was a desperate attempt to seize an old fantasy. He drove home, the file on his passenger seat feeling like a shield. He called Sarah immediately. "I have it all," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "The official will, the estate documents, even a letter from Mr. Peterson himself." "She's a liar, and I can prove it." "Excellent," Sarah said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "We have everything we need. This handwritten note is worthless, but her actions are not. We can file for a restraining order and we can move to sue her for slander and malicious prosecution. We'll send the letters and demands today. We will also contact the police department with this new evidence and have the tape removed. This stops now." The next morning, Michael watched from his window as a new patrol car pulled up, accompanied by a city code enforcement officer. He walked outside, meeting them at his driveway. Sarah was there, too, a formidable presence in a tailored suit. They presented the official documents, the will, and Mr. Peterson's letter. The officers, different from the pair who had first responded, read the papers with a growing sense of professional embarrassment. They looked at the handwritten note Deborah had provided, which she had proudly given to them as evidence, and then at the official file, and the verdict was clear. "This is a fraudulent claim, ma'am," the officer said to Deborah, who had emerged from her house and was watching the scene with a triumphant sneer. "You have no legal claim to this property. Your document is not a valid will. We are removing the police tape, and you are to cease all contact with Mr. Miller, including this Facebook campaign. He is well within his rights to drain his pool. Any further attempts to harass him will result in your immediate arrest." Deborah's face, a mask of self-righteous fury, crumpled. Her protestations, her furious claims of injustice, fell on deaf ears. She was now the one being ignored, dismissed. Michael watched as the police tape was taken down, the yellow ribbon that had symbolized his nightmare now a discarded mess on the lawn. The city official gave him a formal professional nod. "You're all clear to proceed, Mr. Miller," the official said, turning to walk away. "Just make sure the discharge is handled properly. We have your permit application on file." Michael felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. He looked at Sarah, who gave him a small, professional smile. The nightmare was over. He had won. He looked toward Deborah's house and saw her retreating inside, her mother standing at the window, a look of profound sadness on her face, a silent, fragile echo of a life Michael had only just uncovered. As the city official turned to leave, his phone buzzed. He listened for a moment, his brow furrowing. He looked at Michael with a grim, apologetic expression. "Mr. Miller, one more thing. A complaint has just been filed by your neighbor, Mr. Harrison, a few doors down. He's claiming the water from your pool has caused significant foundation damage. He's already called a structural engineer and has a report ready." The official pointed to the house 2 doors down, where a man Michael recognized as the Greg Harrison from the Facebook page was standing on his porch, a look of righteous anger on his face. Michael looked at his own lawn, now a soggy swamp, and then at the clean, yellowed ribbon of police tape, a symbol of a battle he had just won, now rendered meaningless. He had won one fight, only to find himself standing at the beginning of a much larger and more serious war. The silence returned, but this time it was not a peaceful stillness. It was the heavy, thrumming quiet of a battlefield after the first volley, a moment of profound and terrible stillness before the next attack. The city official's words hung. In the humid air, a hammer blow to the fragile structure of Michael's newfound peace. A complaint, foundation damage, a structural engineer, a report. He had just won his victory, only to discover the entire war was a lie, a distraction from the real threat. He turned to look at Greg Harrison, the man from the Facebook page. Greg wasn't a caricature like Deborah. He was a man in a crisp polo, shirt and khakis, his hands on his hips, his face a mask of solemn, quiet outrage. This wasn't a performance. This was a man with a legitimate grievance. Michael's stomach twisted into a cold knot. The victorious feeling of a moment ago evaporated, replaced by a deep and terrifying dread. This was a real problem with real consequences. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, was already on her phone. "Greg Harrison?" she said, her voice sharp. "Did he send you a letter, Michael? We need to get a copy of that report immediately." "I just got it just now," Michael said, his voice flat. He pointed a trembling finger toward Greg's house. "He's over there. He's been waiting." The city official, uncomfortable in the midst of this new conflict, offered a final, grim piece of advice. "Mr. Miller, I would suggest you do not run that pump again until this is sorted out. The city code is clear. You are responsible for any damage caused by the runoff. This is a civil matter now, but it's a serious one. He has a report. You need a lawyer and your own structural engineer, and you need to get them both out here immediately." He turned and walked away, his departure marking the end of one nightmare and the beginning of another. Deborah, watching from her window, was no longer a threat, but an irrelevance. She had been the diversion, the red herring, while the real danger had been quietly waiting in the wings. Michael walked over to his fence and looked down at his own lawn. It was a swamp. The water, unable to drain away fast enough, had created a small, shallow pond. The ground was saturated, spongy. He looked over at Greg's house, which was set slightly lower on the cul-de-sac's gentle slope. His foundation, a few feet away from the runoff, was at a real risk. He called Sarah back, his voice now filled with a new kind of terror. "He's got me, Sarah. The water. It went everywhere. I followed the code, but the ground couldn't take it. It's a mess." "Calm down, Michael," she said, her voice a lifeline in the storm. "It's not over yet. He has a report, but it's just a report. We'll get our own. We will investigate the history of this property. We will get to the bottom of this. Do not speak to him. Do not apologize. Do not admit fault. We'll take it from here." The next few days were a blur of new phone calls, new professional jargon, and new expenses. Michael's dream of a fixer-upper had become a bottomless pit of lawyers' fees and specialist consultations. A structural engineer, a gray-haired man with a skeptical expression, spent an entire morning inspecting Michael's property and then Greg's. He took soil samples, he measured grades, he took pictures of cracks. The tension between Michael and Greg was a palpable thing, a silent, seething animosity that was more terrifying than Deborah's theatrical outbursts. Greg would stand on his porch, watching, his quiet surveillance more unnerving than 1,000 complaints. Michael, meanwhile, felt a new wave of anger rising within him, not at Greg, but at the sheer unfairness of it all. He had done everything right. He had filed the permit. He had researched the drainage. He had even, at the first sign of trouble, stopped the pump. He was a victim of his own diligence. The structural engineer's report came a few days later, a cold, clinical document that felt like a verdict. It confirmed Greg's claims. The massive influx of water from the pool had indeed saturated the soil, leading to significant visible cracking in Greg's foundation. The cost of the repairs would be astronomical. The report included pictures of the cracks, the watermarks, and a formal recommendation for a full-scale repair and soil stabilization project. Sarah, reading the report over the phone, was silent for a moment. "Michael, this is bad," she finally said. "His report is solid. Our engineer agrees. He has a very strong case. The damage is a direct result of your actions, even if you were following the rules. This isn't a civil suit anymore. This is a negotiation about who pays for a very expensive repair. So what? I'm supposed to pay for his foundation? I just moved in. I just bought this house. I drained my own pool. This isn't fair." The words came out in a rush, a bitter, futile protest against a world that seemed determined to punish him for the smallest transgression. "Fair isn't in the legal dictionary, Michael," she said gently. "But we have a card to play. I did some digging, like I said I would. We need to go back to the county recorder's office. I want you to look up the original plat map for the cul-de-sac. The original plans for the entire development. I've got a hunch." Michael, filled with a new, desperate hope, went back to the county office. He found the Plat Maps for his cul-de-sac, a massive blueprint-sized document of the entire neighborhood. He unrolled it on a long table, his eyes scanning the intricate lines and labels. The maps showed every house, every property line, every utility connection. And then he found it. Beneath the intricate grid of the cul-de-sac, running like a long, straight vein between Michael's property and Greg's, was a thin, dotted line. It was labeled Stormwater Relief Channel. It was a drainage channel, a planned trench designed to carry away excess water from the area. But when he looked at the current landscaping, at the pristine, flat lawns of their properties, there was no trench. It had been filled in, paved over, forgotten. He ran his finger along the line, a sudden, blinding clarity washing over him. The Stormwater Relief Channel, the one that should have carried the water from his pool safely away, was gone. It had been filled in decades ago, likely by an owner who wanted a bigger, flatter yard. He had been a victim not of his own carelessness, but of a long-forgotten critical flaw in the very design of his neighborhood, a secret buried beneath years of suburban perfection. He called Sarah, his voice trembling with a mix of shock and newfound purpose. "Sarah, I have it. The Plat Maps. There's a drainage channel, a relief channel, right between my property and Greg's. It was supposed to carry the water away, but it's gone. It's been filled in. This isn't my fault. This is the fault of whoever filled that channel in." He paused, a new terrible thought dawning on him. "And Greg? He's lived here for years. He's the one who planted those prize-winning rose bushes on his side of the property line, the ones that are right where that channel was supposed to be." He ended the call, his heart a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. It wasn't an accident. Greg's foundation damage might have been a long time coming, and the fact that Greg had so quickly hired a structural engineer and had a report ready made the situation all the more suspicious. He wasn't a victim. He was a man who had known about a ticking time bomb under his house for years, and was now trying to pin the blame on an unsuspecting neighbor. It was a shocking twist of irony, a new beat that changed the entire game, and Michael knew with a sudden, terrible certainty that this was just the beginning of the truth. The blueprint felt cold and unyielding in Michael's hands, a map of a forgotten past. He and Sarah had returned to his house. The massive document of the cul-de-sac's original design spread across his dining room table. The thin, dotted line for the stormwater relief channel was a silent witness to a long-buried secret. The truth was now a tangible thing, a series of lines and labels that spoke volumes more than Deborah's rants or Greg's quiet accusations. "This is it," Sarah said, her finger tracing the line. "This is our smoking gun. It's a violation of city code to alter the original plat map without a permit. The city would have a record of it. If there's no record, then whoever filled this in is responsible for the runoff damage, not you." Michael's gaze drifted from the blueprint to the window where Greg was still standing on his porch, a silent sentinel of his own making. The prize-winning rose bushes, a vibrant splash of color in the middle of Greg's perfectly manicured lawn, sat directly on top of where the channel should have been. A cold wave of clarity washed over Michael. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate act of selfishness, a choice made decades ago for the sake of aesthetics, and now a debt was coming due. Sarah made a call, her voice now a weapon. She spoke to the city's code enforcement officer, detailing their discovery, citing the plat map and referencing the lack of a permit for the alteration. She then called Greg's lawyer, a terse professional conversation that left Michael with a sense of quiet anticipation. "He's not happy," Sarah said, hanging up the phone. "He's still trying to argue that the damage is a direct result of your action. But now we have a different story. The foundation was compromised by the filled-in channel. Your draining of the pool was the catalyst, but not the cause. We are meeting with him and his lawyer tomorrow, and we are going to expose the truth." The meeting took place in a small, sterile conference room in Sarah's office. Greg sat across the table, his face a mask of simmering fury and disbelief. His lawyer, a slick man with a slicker smile, tried to maintain control of the conversation, but Sarah was relentless. She presented the evidence with the cool, professional precision of a surgeon. The original plat map, the lack of a permit for the alteration. A letter from the city stating that the responsibility for any damage resulting from the filled-in channel would fall to the property owner who committed the act. Greg's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. He tried to deny it, claiming the channel was filled in before he moved in. But Michael, remembering his conversation with Tom, spoke up. "You planted those rose bushes, Greg. You told Tom that they were the culmination of years of work. Those bushes are exactly where the channel was supposed to be. You knew about this. You knew you had a ticking time bomb under your house, and when I started draining my pool, you saw a way out." The accusation hung in the air. Greg's lawyer tried to object, but Sarah silenced him with a single, sharp look. The silence was deafening. Greg, no longer a righteous victim, was now a man exposed. The color drained from his face. He looked at Michael with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "I was building my home," Greg said, his voice a low, strangled whisper. "I wanted a beautiful yard. It wasn't a big deal." "It's a big deal now," Michael said, his own voice steady and calm. "It's your foundation, and it's your responsibility. The water I drained was just the final drop in a very full bucket you had been carrying for years." The meeting ended quickly. Greg's lawyer, realizing they had no case, folded. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. Greg would pay for all the repairs to his foundation, and a new proper drainage system would be installed on both properties to prevent future issues. The city, in its own bureaucratic wisdom, also levied a substantial fine against him for the illegal alteration of the plat map. Michael walked out of the office and into the warm afternoon sun, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. He had won, not a petty battle, but a full-fledged war for his home and his sanity. The false accusations were gone. The police tape was a forgotten relic. The threat of financial ruin was lifted. He drove home and saw a familiar sight. Deborah, standing At her window, a look of profound, silent defeat on her face. She had lost her false claim, and in the process, she had lost her reputation as the neighborhood's moral authority. Her Facebook page, Save Our Culdesac, had been taken down. Her reign was over. He pulled into his driveway, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a sense of peace. He walked over to his pool, the half-drained, algae-stained monument to his past struggles. He turned the pump back on, and the sound of gushing water was no longer an ominous alarm, but a triumphant song of renewal. The next day, as the sun rose, Michael watched a crew arrive. Not a police crew, not lawyers, but a team of workers who started to work on his pool. The first thing they did was start to chip away at the old cracked plaster. Then they began to dig. He didn't know what they would find, what other forgotten secrets the ground might hold. But as he watched them work, a feeling of deep peace settled over him. He had fought a battle he didn't ask for, and he had come out on the other side, a man changed for the better. He was no longer a victim, no longer a suspect. He was a homeowner, ready to finally, truly begin his life anew. The hum of the work crew was a promise of a future, and a future, it seemed, he had truly.